32 pounds. That's what a healthy 3-year-old weighs. That's what grocery bags filled with milk and bread weigh. That's what Emani Moss weighed when she died at 10 years old. Her body, so small and fragile, was found burned in a trash can in Gwinnett County, Georgia, in 2013. This is not just another true crime story about child abuse and murder. This is about a little girl who screamed for help in every way she knew how, and a system that heard her but didn't truly listen. I need you to understand something. The details you're about to hear are difficult. They're painful, but Emani's story deserves to be told because her voice was silenced too soon. Also, make sure to subscribe and like for more real crime stories that reveal the truth and give a voice to the victims. Emani Moss was born into a world that should have protected her. Her father, Eman Moss, seemed to find hope when he met Tiffany Nicole Moss at Freedom Christian Church in the late 2000s. Tiffany worked there as a preschool teacher, someone entrusted with the care of children. They married in July 2009, and to outsiders, they appeared to be building a family. Tiffany and Eman had 2 children together, and there's no evidence that these children suffered the way Emani would suffer. But something shifted after March 2010. That's when everything changed for Emani, a beating so severe that it cost Tiffany her job at the preschool. Think about that for a moment. A woman whose profession was caring for children lost that position because of what she did to her stepdaughter. The warning signs weren't subtle. They were glaring red flags waving desperately in the wind. In 2010, 10-year-old Emani confided in a school nurse, telling her she was afraid to go home with a bad report card. She feared her parents would hurt her. When the nurse examined her, she found what no child should ever bear on their body: multiple scabs, bruises, and welts. This wasn't an accident. This was a pattern. Tiffany Moss was arrested. She pleaded guilty to child cruelty. She received 5 years of probation. The system had intervened. Emani was placed with her grandmother, Robin, and for 6 beautiful months, this little girl thrived. Her grades improved. She smiled more. She was safe. But the Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services made a decision that would seal Emani's fate. In fall 2010, they returned her to her father's home, despite Robin's desperate efforts to keep her granddaughter safe. What happened next is a chronicle of missed opportunities and ignored pleas. In July 2012, Emani ran away from home, not once, but twice. The first time, she went to the apartment office staff and told them that Tiffany had tied her up with a belt and placed her in a cold shower. Imagine being so desperate, so terrified, that you run to strangers begging for help. The second time, police found her sleeping in bushes. When they asked why she ran away, her answer was heartbreakingly simple: because her stepmother was mean to her. A child doesn't sleep in bushes unless home is worse than the darkness outside. A child doesn't repeatedly cry out for help unless the pain is unbearable. But somehow, Emani kept being sent back. Between 2012 and 2013, Emani disappeared from view. She stopped going to school. Neighbors stopped seeing her, and behind closed doors in that Gwinnett County apartment, a little girl was starving to death. Not from poverty or lack of resources, but from deliberate cruelty. While Tiffany and Eman's biological children were fed, Emani wasted away. On October 28, 2013, Emani Moss died. She was 10 years old and weighed 32 pounds, the size of an average toddler. Her tiny body bore the evidence of prolonged suffering, of systematic starvation, of a childhood stolen by the very people who should have protected her. But death wasn't the end of Emani's degradation. According to police reports, Eman Moss came home to find his daughter not breathing. He claimed he performed CPR, but never called for medical help, never called 911, never rushed her to a hospital. Instead, he said Tiffany advised him to burn Emani's body. They placed this child, this little girl who once had dreams and favorite colors and maybe a favorite song, into a galvanized steel trash can and set her on fire. When authorities discovered Emani's remains, the investigation into this horrific murder case quickly led to both Tiffany and Eman Moss. The community was shocked. The brutality of the crime, the calculated concealment, and the complete disregard for a child's life sent waves of horror through Georgia and beyond. Eman Moss eventually pleaded guilty and cooperated with authorities. But Tiffany Moss's case would become one of the most unusual criminal trials in Georgia's legal history. The trial began in April 2019, and from the very first moment, it was clear this would be unlike any capital murder case observers had ever witnessed. Tiffany Moss had experienced state capital defenders assigned to her, attorneys who specialize in death penalty cases and understand the complexities of mounting a defense when someone's life hangs in the balance. But Tiffany insisted on representing herself. Now, defendants have a constitutional right to self-representation. But in death penalty cases, this decision is almost unheard of because the stakes couldn't be higher. Legal experts tried to dissuade her. The judge questioned her repeatedly, but Tiffany Moss was adamant. She would face a murder trial, a trial that could end with her execution alone. What happened next was extraordinary and deeply troubling. Tiffany's defense attorneys had prepared boxes of evidence. She never reviewed them. She produced no list of defense witnesses. She conducted almost no preparation. When asked about her strategy, she said she was placing her defense in God's hands. The capital defenders were so concerned that they filed an emergency motion with the court. Neuropsychological testing had revealed that Tiffany Moss had significant damage to the premotor and prefrontal regions of her brain. These are the areas responsible for executive function, decision-making, impulse control, the very cognitive abilities you need to represent yourself in a complex legal proceeding. The testing suggested she might not be mentally capable of making these decisions. But the judge ruled that Tiffany understood her rights and allowed the trial to proceed. During the trial itself, Tiffany's behavior was chilling. She asked very few questions during pretrial proceedings. When the prosecution presented their case, she gave no opening statement. As witnesses testified about Emani's suffering, about the bruises and the starvation and the burns, Tiffany asked no questions. She didn't cross-examine anyone. There were even reports that she laughed when the judge forced her to speak. When the prosecution rested their case, presenting all their evidence of this brutal child murder, Tiffany Moss presented no defense. Nothing. No witnesses, no evidence, no explanation. She simply sat there, silent. District Attorney Danny Porter later described it as one of the worst cases he'd ever seen. He said that the first time you look at it, it makes you sick. The last time you look at it, it still makes you sick. The evidence was overwhelming. The details were nauseating. And the defendant offered nothing in her own defense. The jury deliberated and found Tiffany Moss guilty of murder, cruelty to children, and concealing a death. Then came the sentencing phase, where the same jury would decide whether Tiffany should spend life in prison or be sentenced to death. Again, Tiffany presented no mitigation evidence. In death penalty cases, this is when defendants present everything that might explain their actions or generate sympathy: childhood trauma, mental illness, abuse, anything that might convince a jury to spare their life. Tiffany remained silent. After 2.5 hours of deliberation, 6 men and 6 women returned with a unanimous decision: death by lethal injection. As the verdict was read aloud, Tiffany Moss showed no emotion, no tears, no reaction, nothing. This is where the story becomes even more complicated. Was justice served? A jury heard the evidence and made their decision. But can we truly call it justice when the defendant appears to have orchestrated their own death sentence? When someone with documented brain damage is allowed to sabotage their own defense? Since her conviction, Tiffany Moss has become the only woman on Georgia's death row, housed at Arendelle State Prison. No execution date has been set. The case is subject to automatic appeals under Georgia law, a process that typically takes many years. In January 2024, Gwinnett County Superior Court Judge Karen Byers rejected Tiffany's motion for a new trial. The judge ruled that Moss had intelligently, voluntarily, and knowingly invoked her right to self-representation, but legal experts continue to debate whether someone with significant brain damage can truly make such a decision knowingly. If Tiffany Moss is eventually executed, she will be only the third woman executed in Georgia's entire history. The rarity of this outcome speaks to how exceptional this case is, not just in its brutality but in how it unfolded in court. But this story isn't really about Tiffany Moss. It's about Emani. It's about a little girl who deserves so much better. It's about a child welfare system that failed at multiple critical junctures. Robin Moss, Emani's grandmother, has spoken publicly about her frustration with the Georgia Division of Family and Children Services. She fought to keep Emani safe, and the system overruled her. After Emani's death, there was talk of reforms, of doing better, of protecting vulnerable children. But Robin said she didn't want to hear about reforms. She needed to see children actually being saved. How many times did Emani have to ask for help? How many people saw the bruises, heard her fears, found her sleeping in bushes, and still sent her back? The police were called. Social services were involved. Tiffany was arrested and convicted once before. Yet Emani remained in that home until she starved to death. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about how we protect children, about what we owe to the most vulnerable among us. Emani Moss never got to grow up. She never got to go to middle school, never had a first dance, never learned to drive, never fell in love, never became whoever she was meant to be. Her life was stolen from her slowly, painfully, deliberately, and when she died, she weighed 32 pounds. The courtroom is silent now. The jury has gone home. Tiffany Moss sits in a cell awaiting appeals that could take decades. But somewhere in the evidence, photos and court transcripts is the ghost of a little girl who just wanted to be safe, to be fed, to be loved. This is the Emani Moss case, a story without easy answers. A tragedy that asks us to look at the darkest corners of human nature and the systems we've built to protect the innocent. What do you think? Was justice served? Could anything truly constitute justice after such suffering? If this story moved you, if Emani's memory stirred something in you, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and help keep her story alive.